Steve, it's great to see you back in Ireland. It's been quite a while. In fact, it's been almost 30 years. Is that right?
It really has. I retired in 1990, at the end of the '92 season, and I haven't been back to Ireland since then. So every bit of 30 years. But it's great to be back, and it in many ways, although everything's changed, it feels very much the same. The Irish people they haven't changed.
That's for sure, but it's nice to be back in such pleasant circumstances as well. Old Vic has been inducted into the Kildare Racing Irish Derby Hall of Fame, and of course Old Vic provided you with one of the best days of your career. You might just tell us a bit about that day.
He did. He'd won the French Derby very nicely, and we came over for the Irish Derby, and I spent the night with Stuart Merlis, Julie's uncle, and Charlie was there, and obviously we were all set. We'd had a lovely evening, just talking to, hanging out with their dogs and in their lovely garden at their house. And the next morning, I got the news that maybe Old Vic might be scratched, and I was like, why, And they said he's got a really terrible boil on his back, right on his wither. So, obviously I was like, very upset to hear that, because I knew he was obviously going to win the Derby if he ran in it. Luckily, Henry figured out a way to make some padding and put it over his withers, and to protect him. And obviously he was such a game horse. He ran through it. But it was really just a nice exercise gallop for him. Really, he was never in any danger that day, and it was a wonderful culmination to his career. And I think after that, Sheikh Mohammed decided to give the money to build the Old Vic Gallop.
Yeah, it was a great legacy to leave. But just talking about the Curragh, I mean, obviously, there's no hard luck stories in the Curragh. I mean, it's a big, wide open galloping track, one of the best tracks in the world.
It really is. I always love coming here. It's very hard. You don't have many excuses here because of it being such a wide open galloping track that most of the time, at some point you're going to get a run in a race, and it was always a very fair course, and a lot of great races run here.
You had a lot of great success down through your career, Steve, but you had 5 Irish Classics to your name as well. We might just go through some of them. I mean, Diminuendo won the Oaks for you in 1989 and had won at Epsom, and
right.
Went off a pretty short favourite, but it ended up dead heating that day.
Yeah, it was a weird deal. She, at one point in the race, she felt like she was going to canter up. I was just kind of, and then all of a sudden I would say, okay, let's go. And then Walter Swinburne, who was also on another Sheikh Mohammed horse, medalist, or I can't remember who she was, but I couldn't get away from him. And then, we ended up dead heating. But, so she, for some reason, she obviously wasn't at her best, because, at her best she would have won, by 10. But she still, in spite of that, was good enough to dead heat. So, yeah, she was a great filly. In the Groove she won the 1,000 Guineas, and she was an amazing filly. I won two or three other grade ones on her for David Ellsworth, and trying to remember what else.
Again, a very comfortable victory that day. I mean, she won well.
She did. Again, like I said, I was in the working my way through, and eventually when I got to the straight, I eased her out, and she just picked up and got the job done.
And you won the Oaks in '91 again with Possessive Dancer for Alex Scott. You might just talk us through that.
I did, yeah. That was Ahmed Mohammed's filly. We never used to see much of him. He came racing the odd time, but Alex Scott, who was a great guy, had an unfortunate end, but good trainer, and we came over confident that she was in good form and would run well, and I wasn't exactly expecting to win, but I knew I had a chance, and she really ran a great race that day and won well.
And you showed on Masala in the Ledger here in '92 that you can win anyway, Steve, and Masala trained by John Gosden. You made all the running that day.
Right. Well, as you know, I liked making the running. It was a nice spot. I didn't like anything in my way, just get out there and have no reason to have any excuses. But you know, he was a big galloping horse, and this is a big galloping track. You know, it's a perfect setup for a horse like him. You just have to, you know, pace him right and then make sure you got enough to get home. So he obviously was a very nice horse, and I think he also won like an Italian something, one of the grade ones in Italy, and you know, he was a very nice horse.
You had a lot of great achievements over the course of your career, but obviously starting off in the fashion in which you did, you know, at 17 years of age to ride the American Triple Crown. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that as a start, really.
It doesn't in America. No, that's pretty good. You know, I was blessed that you know, I got off. I was doing well, and you know, getting on affirmed was kind of a, you know, you just have to be in the right place at the right time, because Cordero had won on him before I got the chance to ride him, and Lafitte Pincay had won on him. So these are two great jockeys that if they wanted to ride him, they obviously were, you know, and they were obviously asked to ride him, but nobody knew how good he was at that point. So I got on him, and you know, once I got on him, I wasn't going to let him go without a fight. And luckily, I was able to ride him through his Triple Crown year, and you know, we had great memory, you know, great thrills together. He was just one of those horses that he was kind of press button, you know, he could, you know, you could make him pick up, get through a gap, and then you could almost settle him again and then wait with him and then pick up again when you asked him again. He had gears, and there's not that many horses, you know, around ever that have gears like that.
Yes, they're few and far between. But at 17, did you actually realise what you had just achieved? Did it all kind of pass you by a little bit at that stage, Steve? But certainly I'm sure the reaction afterwards didn't pass you by.
No, I think I mean, I realized what was going on. I mean, Secretariat had won the Triple Crown in '73, and the year before Seattle Slew had won, so it was kind of becoming, you know, commonplace for Triple Crown winners. But I knew how difficult it was. Not only that, I realized what a great horse I was running against. Aladar was a champion in his own right, so I never took him for granted. And you know, then it took, I think, another 37 years for somebody to do it again. So you know, it's you know, I feel like I was you know, when I was a kid, I always hung around older people, you know, because that's where my interest lied, and I was just constantly trying to soak it in. You know, I loved the game, and you know, I was blessed to you know, get on a horse like him at such an early age.
And it wasn't off the ground that you picked up your love for racing. I mean, it was obviously in your family, Steve, and there was a huge love for the horse in your family. Your dad was a farrier, a blacksmith, and your mom was training horses. So you might just tell us a little bit about, you know, your formative stages and how you got to love the horse.
Well, to be quite honest, you know, I was always a pretty good little athlete, and I was a good wrestler, and I've since found out that a lot of good jockeys were good wrestlers when they were younger. But no, really, to be quite honest, when I was 12, you know, before I decided I wanted to be a jockey, my big goal was I wanted to be a football player, you know, which is kind of was America's game, you know, the American football. And I actually played on the 7th grade Pee Wee Football League, and I was 72 pounds, and like our halfback was 140 pounds, and our linemen were 200 pounds. And after running around that summer, I decided I don't want to play football anymore. And that's when I started to think about being a jockey. And, you know, really once I decided, you know, that, and I talked to my father, from that moment on, I was, you know, I had the blinkers on, you know, I was just like, that's what I, you know, was focused on 24/7. And by the time I was 16, I was really actually ready to be you know, to ride. That's the earliest you can get a license in America. I'm not sure how it was back here then, but over there it was 16 years old, and the day I could walk in and try to get my license, I did, and the steward looked over the desk at me, and I looked like I was about 10 years old, and he said, yeah, we have to wait, you know, think about this for a few days. But luckily, you know, some of the trainers and the guys at the gate, you know, they told him that, you know, the kid can do it, you know, he's ready. So I got my license and I got started, and once I got my first winner, things kind of took off for me, and you know, within a couple months I'd ridden 100 winners, and you know, the rest of the year went very well, and I soon went to New York and got off to a great start up there, and and I think that next year I won like 487 races, and that was the year that I first got on affirmed. And of course, the next year I won the Triple Crown, and that's the ups and downs of life and racing is I won the Triple Crown in June, and by March of the next year I was here in Europe. I'd gone through a bad streak, and everything was, everybody said, he's washed up and he's finished at 18, and life is, a crazy roller coaster ride, particularly in horse racing. But it was I knew it was the right thing for me. My weight was always going to be an issue, and so the weight's just being a little bit better over in Europe helped me probably ride for 17 years instead of maybe 7.
America loves a sporting phenom, as you call it yourself, and you were the ultimate one at that stage, obviously,
right.
At 17 years of age. You were named Sports Illustrated Sports Person of the Year as well while you were still at high school. That was the year, as you say, you rode the 487 winners. So,
right.
like, if you're going to announce yourself onto the sporting stage, that's not a bad way to do it either, is it?
It's not. It was a lot of fun. And it's funny because I ran into the 2 people I beat for Sportsman of the Year that year was Muhammad Ali and Reggie Jackson. And so one time I was at a card signing thing, and I ran into Reggie Jackson, and we were talking, and I walked up to him and I said, "My name's Steve Cauthen, how you doing? I've never met, just wanted to say hello." And we talked for a second. He said to a friend of his, "Come here, I want you to meet this guy." He said, I had 2 chances to be Sportsman of the Year. He said, one time a horse beat me, and the other time this little so-and-so beat me. It was just funny, and anyway. But yeah, for a jockey, that was a huge, no other jockey's ever been named Sportsman of the Year for Sports Illustrated. So, another, great time in my life.
It certainly was. And, there's good times and bad times in racing, Stevie. And you've taken some bad falls, but you took a particularly bad fall as a kid at 16. But it seemed unlikely you'd come back from that, but you managed to bounce back. You found a way.
Yeah, it's, when you have falls, people, if anybody that's had a bad fall says that they're not afraid when they get back on a horse, they're lying. But the only way you can ride successfully is to overcome your fear. You just have to choose that you want to ride worse than being afraid. You just have to overcome it somehow. And I was luckily able to do that, on 3 occasions. I had 2 or 3 bad falls. I broke my neck in 1988, I think it was, at Goodwood. That was a bad one. I broke, the one in Saratoga when I fractured my knee was a bad one. So, I've had 2 or 3 pretty bad ones, but at the end of the day, I was probably tentative for a bit, but eventually you realize either I'm going to do this or I need to pack it in. And, luckily I was able to, overcome it. And I rode my last bad fall when I broke my neck. I rode at least 5 or 6 more years, and I would have ridden another 10 years if I hadn't, my weight is what made me quit riding, not the fact that I didn't love what I did, didn't love the sport and love riding. I just, everything about riding other than my weight, keeping my weight down was, perfect.
We'll probably explore that a little bit more later on, but just to get back to the earlier part of your career, you had that fall and, but you had a lot of highs on the track, but you also had some lows. You had a very long losing streak.
Right.
So it was hard to get your head around that as well when you've had such success so early in your career, Stevie.
Right. Well, it was. And what was really hard to get my head wrapped around was that all these people who were, treating me like, the holy one, 1 minute were like, basically calling me washed up the next minute. These riders or even people that I'd been riding winners for, all of a sudden they didn't want to talk to me. I couldn't get a ride for them. It was a real wake-up call in reality about life. But it was a great, in the end it was a great learning experience, and part of who I am, part of what makes me who I am now. I think it made me stronger, and it's just part of growing up.
And speaking of strength, you always did it your own way, but you were one of the first basically to adopt that riding style of riding with the balls of your feet in the stirrup, and everybody uses that now, but at the time it was less common.
Right. Well, it's not unusual in America. Everybody in America does it, but I was maybe the first one here that rode here long enough to where people watched me and and decided to give it a try. Walter Swinburne was one of the riders at the time. And he had, as he adapted, when he tried it, he's the back of the calves of my legs are killing me. But I said, you'll get over that. And then once he did. But I think the other thing that was big was Frankie went over to America, and so when he came back, he did it as well. And obviously, Frankie, everybody, follows what Frankie does, and that's probably as much the fact that he did it as well changed things here.
Obviously, riding winners is important, and volume is important, but it's quality as well as quantity. And at a certain point in your career, Steve, it's all about the big race wins,
right.
Isn't it?
It is, and so yeah, I guess we were talking about the 1987 Jockeys Championship. I'd won a couple, and I went through this battle with Pat Edry for the last 4 months. We were like neck and neck, and so but at the end of that, I beat him by 2, and it nearly killed me. He was okay, he was fine, but I was like knackered, and so that was the end of that. So from that point on, it was like what I really am focused on is trying to win big races and focus on quality more than quantity, and that's, as you say, the ones that pay.
You've been there, done that, and you decided the time was right to retire at 32 years of age, but you had a lot of battles in the lead up to making that decision. Again, you might just talk us through those.
Yeah, it's hard to quit something that you're really good at, and also to know that you'll never really probably ever be as good at anything else that you ever do in your life as you were at that. But life's short, and I also realized I really kind of wanted to start a family. And actually, when my family was growing up, I wanted to be there with them, and I knew while I was riding it would be tough to do that. And like I said, fighting my weight was really, I was just tired of it. So it all kind of happened that it all came to a big bang, and I decided it was time to go back home and try to start doing something else. And after playing golf for a couple of years, I decided I'd start getting into the breeding, and so I've done that for probably the last 20 years. And now I'm also a racing manager for a stable in Kentucky called Dixiana Farm, and I'm also going to help Three Chimneys as well. And I just being back involved is like so cool, because racing is a great sport, but part of what makes racing such a great sport is the characters, the people, feeling like you're part of it. It makes you feel whole. It makes you feel like you're alive, and it's really been great being in that level of the sport again.
And speaking of the characters and the people, I mean, there's a lot of great characters and great people here around the Curragh who you've been friendly with down through the years. You might just tell us who they are and how your friendships were formed.
Well, Charlie Merlis, who I'm looking forward to seeing today, just a great guy, and he's funny as he'll make you laugh looking at him. Obviously, Mick Canan, Johnny Murtaugh, the guys that I rode with, and some of the trainers. I knew Dermot very well, and I've gotten to meet Aidan O'Brien. I got to meet Joseph as well. Just watching their careers. These guys are great horsemen, great people. They're very humble. I think Aidan just won the highest amount of English classics 41. The other day, which is like, and he still looks like he's about 40 years old, so it's amazing.
You mentioned Johnny Murtaugh. Obviously, you rode against Mick Canan. He was one of your adversaries, but Johnny used to look up to you, Steve, and he used to seek your advice quite a bit. You might just tell us about that.
Yeah, well, we used to spend a lot of time in the sauna together, and we became good buddies. And so I obviously had retired, and I think at one point when Johnny was struggling with his weight and maybe not riding too many winners, he gave me a call up in America and was asking me, what do you think? I mean, about, I'm thinking I might want to retire, I said, there's tons of other things to do. I wasn't really trying to talk him into retiring, but I was letting him realize that, he didn't have to ride forever. But thank God he didn't listen to me, because I think since after that he rode about 3 Epsom Derby winners and quite a few, Irish Derby winners. Rode for the O'Brien team for a while, and obviously would have been sad for him not to have done all that.
And Mick Kinane, again, a great horseman, and fantastic success down through his career.
He has been, and he was again a great guy. We were always friends, really right through, because he's a real guy. There's no highs or lows about him. He's an average guy, and he and a great rider. And he and his wife Cauthen and my wife Amy, we all became friends. Obviously, after I left, he had great success. Obviously, riding Galileo, who was like one of the stalwarts of Irish racing lore, and many others for Vincent O'Brien. Then he rode Sea of the Stars, and so many good horses. And now he's living the dream here in this beautiful country.
Magnificent piece of ground here in the Curragh as well, Steve. I mean, it's just one of the great racing grounds of the world, and it's been 30 years since you've been here. The place has changed quite a bit since you've seen it. It looks well, doesn't it?
Everything but the course itself, the course looks exactly like it did, and it's a great course. I loved riding on it. Like I said, it's a course where there's no excuses. You really very rarely have a hard luck story. I mean, you're good enough or you're not good enough usually. But to see all the gallops and to actually hear that I think there's 800 or 900 horses in training right here on the grounds is great to hear, and the fact that Irish racing's doing so well.
And we got a nice stand here as well. We've always had this magnificent track, but the stand had gotten quite ramshackle down through the years. But it's wonderful that it now has a really, really nice, attractive area for people to watch the racing as well.
It does, and it's beautiful. As you say, it deserved a great stand for a great course. And I'm sure, like everything, somehow you have to figure out how you're going to pay for it. But it's well deserved for this course, and it's a magnificent stand. It really is.
Your kids are more into the arts than sports, I believe. You've always said racing was a tough business, so I'm sure you didn't want to lead them down that road, did you?
Well, I was willing to lead them down that road if they chose that road, but obviously I wasn't trying to push them that way. They all had ponies when they were kids. They rode a little bit, but my dad taught me. Right, he's like, if you're going to do this, you got to muck out, you got to brush. So I followed my dad's good advice, and I found not too long after that, they weren't quite willing to do all that work. My wife also got them into dancing at the time, and they tended to, they lent towards that side. So the arts and dancing, and so I've got one that, my wife and my oldest daughter have a dance studio together, and my middle daughter's into fashion over in England. She's lives in London and works for Tommy Hilfiger, and then my youngest is trying to make it on Broadway. So they all picked very easy things to do, but not really. But it's. I'm happy as long as they're happy. Really, that's kind of, my dad never pushed me into racing. He just, it was a question that was there for me, and eventually I figured out that that's what I wanted to do.
I'm sure they're very competitive, just like their dad as well, Steve. But when you gave up the racing, you took up the golf, and you started at a 24 handicap, and you got down to 6. Why does that surprise me?
Yeah, well, it's hard to walk away from something this competitive and then not have anything in your life to do competitively. So I had to find something, and golf was what it was, and I loved it, and it was great, and I really was focused on and then I finally kind of hit that plateau when I got to the 6. I couldn't get down. I realized that there wasn't enough hours in the day for me to get any better.
And a couple of final racing questions. I mean, you won a couple of derbies as well on Slip Anchor and Reference Point. You might just talk us through those. They were special days. Always winning an English Derby and Epsom Derby is a special day.
Right. Well, I was lucky. I rode for two of the great owner breeders, Lord Howard de Walden and Louis Friedman. And so Slip Anchor was my first derby. It was the first derby for Henry Cecil. It was the first derby for Lord Howard de Walden, and it was just one of those special things. And leading up to it, I mean, Slip Anchor was a horse that had only run once as a 2-year-old, so nobody really knew he was in the yard. But he just really, as a 3-year-old, just started improving leaps and bounds in his 3-year-old season. And we got to the Derby, and I was like very confident. I called my dad, had made sure he could come over, and Lord Howard de Walden was like, "Quit saying he's going to win." He was like, you're going to jinx it." And but anyway, and obviously Reference Point. There were two opposite types of horses. Slip Anchor went around Epsom like a cat around a barrel, but Reference Point was more of he would have actually we were talking, he should have run here as well, because this would have been the perfect course for him. He loved a nice track where he was meeting the ground, but somehow I held him together coming around the bend into Epsom, and he got the job done.
And then, of course, there was Oh So Sharp. You'd won the Triple Crown in America back in the late 70s, and then to win a Triple Crown on Oh So Sharp was special as well.
Right.
Won the 2 Fillies Classics, and then went on to win the Leger.
She did. I really, when I look back at it, I almost think she's probably was the best horse I ever rode in Europe. She was just that good. She, I rode, obviously, to me, a horse that what makes a horse great is that they can do it all. And she won from 6 furlongs to 1 3/4. She really should have been unbeaten. She got beaten the King George on rock hard ground, and she got beat in the International at York on bottomless ground against a old 4-year-old Comanche run who'd won the Leger. She just was a really special filly, and I actually rode a daughter of hers and won a Grade 1 on her Rosefinch. So she just there's certain special horses, and she was definitely one of them. Obviously on Slip Anchor's Derby Day, I think I kind of was almost going to say this is the best horse I've ever ridden, but he obviously couldn't carry it on. He was injured in a box accident, and he never was the same after. So it's hard to make a career on just one race. So but she was just amazingly special, and I rode a lot of good fillies. I was in the Groove here. Trip Teach was a great filly, and that's one of the things that makes me say Oh So Sharp was so good. Trip Teach won 11 Grade 1s, and Oh So Sharp beat her 6 lengths in the Oaks like she was an average horse.
Most professional sports people, Steve, say that they don't really appreciate, the most important winner is obviously your next one. But when you get to retire, you get a chance to look back on some of the great achievements of your career. And I think from your perspective, one of the great achievements was the fact that you rode the winner of the English, Irish, French, Italian and Kentucky Derbies. That's a great achievement to look back on. I'm sure you do so with great pride.
Well, I do. Like you said, it's just an unusual thing. Like you said, I had a early career in America where I was young enough to win the Derby there, and then get over here and figure it all out here and get with the right people so I could win the Derby, the different Derbies over here. But it's just unusual. I had an unusual career. I think on my Hall of Fame plaque it says something like that. Very unique career. But it was, I never regret any of it.
It most certainly was a unique career. It's been a great pleasure to meet you, Steve, and we're delighted to have you back here in Ireland. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Cheers.